We have over 50 billion tons of carbon being emitted every year. We're either going to ignore the problem and the world is going to just heat up, or at some point people are going to wake up to it and go, we have to do something about it. It's a clock that's running down. The world needs to change. The whole world needs to decarbonize. That's going to take a lot of investments, and founders within climate space, we need to help them succeed.
Why are you specifically drawn to the climate tech space?
I'd feel really bad if I didn't do my best, like in 30 years' time, when I'm old and retired, and my children and grandchildren are like, well, you were doing innovation, you were doing startups, you were investing. Why did you not do more?
Welcome to the Virtuous Mindset.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on. And I was just thinking about how we spoke a couple of weeks ago on Teams, and you were telling me all about the world of investing and talking about your entrepreneurial journey. So I can't wait to get stuck in. Before we get started, as a founder, what does it mean to you to have a virtuous mindset?
Gosh, it's like there's so many different ways of looking at it. But like I kind of think about it in terms of like wanting to do the best you can and being honest and just making the right decisions and like not trying to cut corners, and just I feel like there's like sort of like good karma kind of a thing in the world. Like, so, you know, there are entrepreneurs I know or have come across who would maybe like bend the truth, take a shortcut and everything, and like more often than not that comes back to you. So like I feel like the you know, to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to kind of be open, honest, work hard, you know, push yourself, everything like that. But it also comes with just like from a perspective of like honesty and not taking shortcuts and just doing the hard yards, basically. Yeah. Having that grit.
Yeah, I get that. And I feel like honesty goes a long way. And yes. I agree with what goes around comes around. Like it's so important. So no, rings true. You've had a wide array of different roles. I mean, when I think about it, you've sort of spent the first years of your life within the corporate space. So McKinsey, JP Morgan, and then you spent the rest of it, you know, being an entrepreneur and then the investment space. Talk me through that journey in terms of where you started and where you are today.
There was like no strategy to it. So basically I graduated from school, had to do my military service in Finland, came to university in the UK, did pretty well at university, and, you know, did the classic corporate finance, strategy consultancies at JP Morgan, McKinsey. Then I did the third one, which is private equity. So I was like literally building a good career in a very classic mold of someone who's good at maths, basically. And I was really enjoying it. And I guess 2009 came along and it disrupted the sort of the leveraged buyout market, where I was, you know, a principal at a private equity firm. And I knew that the market would be kind of dead for the next 5 years. So I was like, oh, maybe I should look at like venture capital instead, because that was like doing pretty well. And as luck would have it, some of my friends were basically setting up Rainmaking at the time. And they were like, why don't you do that instead with us? And I was like, I basically just went to my wife, is like, how would you feel about not having any salary for the next 2 years? And she went like, you can have 2 years, but it better work. And if not, then you have to go and get a real job after that. So I guess like my first 10 years were literally like the sort of classic career track of like, I was doing pretty well, I was successful, I was enjoying it. I wasn't passionate about it, but like I was good at it. So it was just easy to continue. And actually, I think if the financial crisis hadn't happened, right now, I think I'd be a managing director at a PE fund or something like that. Like, why would I have changed it? Like, there was like, it's very hard to walk away from something that's like, you know, pays very well, you're good at it, you're like clear career progression. So I was lucky enough to have that disruption in my career that like made me think of what I actually wanted to do. And like it made me realize that I really wanted to do the entrepreneurial thing. And, you know, that was 14 years ago, and I've never, 15 years ago now, and I've never looked back since then.
Wow, it feels like, you know, sometimes you have to have something happen in life for you then to look in another direction.
Completely.
And it's just, you know, crazy how that happened. Like you said, you would have stayed, you would have continued, and you wouldn't have pursued another opportunity. And yeah, it took that sort of like a shock to the whole sort of wider market for my firm to suffer from it, which made me kind of go like, well, am I going to get a job somewhere else?
or, you know, within the same industry, or like, should I just take that moment to look somewhere else? And like, I'm just really glad that happened, even though at the time it was incredibly painful. You know, like, like we
you've
were
got the
living
golden
in
shackles.
and I was living in New York. I was like, I had opened up our like New York office for my firm. I was leading it. It was like great, and all of a sudden that like fun train came to a stop, and I was like, how annoying, but like actually turned out to be the best thing that could have ever happened to me. So
no, that's really interesting. Well, let's talk about rainmaking, because again, when I was thinking about all of the businesses that you've set up and got involved in, rainmaking really stood out. So for those that don't know too much about rainmaking, can you give us a brief overview of what it is?
So there's no brief answer to it, because basically it wasn't set out to be the thing it is today. So what happened, as I said, like my friends in Denmark, they were setting up rainmaking. They asked me to join. I kind of set up our London presence, and like we grew from there. Originally, it was meant to be like a partnership of entrepreneurs, a bit like a law firm setup, but for entrepreneurs, where we would like each be a CEO, founder of our startup, but we would share the risk and rewards together by collectively owning the equity in those startups. And actually, once we had established that startup, we would like recruit a second generation management team, and we would do it again. So a bit like a sort of a startup incubator or a factory, where we would just use our own skills to ideate an idea, bring it to market, and then like rinse and repeat, which is what we did. I think we've so far launched like 52 different startups over the years. And a third of them have died. A third of them have probably exited in one way or another. Some of them for like nothing, some of them for something. And a third of them are sort of like in the middle. But like, and some of them we built ourselves, sometimes with some other ones with corporates. Like it's a real mix. But in 2010, one of those startups that we launched was Startup Bootcamp, which then just grew into this very large accelerator program. And on the back of that, we basically had corporate partners come on board and kind of support that program. And then they started asking us if we could help them with their like wider innovation initiatives. And like, as an entrepreneur, when you have a corporate basically saying like, we'll pay you to help us with these problems, you kind of go like, that sounds like a consultancy we could build. So we basically built an innovation consultancy on the back of the demand that we got from our corporate partners. And that just grew into a larger business. And actually, just a couple of weeks ago, we sold the Asia Pacific business to one of the major consultancy firms in the world. So like something that grew out of kind of like a random opportunity grew into a major business that we were able to kind of build and then eventually exit. But like over time, rainmaking has started from being a sort of a startup factory to being someone that runs one of the largest accelerator programs in the world, has a large innovation business, has a venture studio where we build ventures ourselves. And then more recently, we've started, you know, supporting other founders by investing in them and building programs around being able to support them through, you know, their funding rounds, etc. So in short, we kind of like try and unleash entrepreneurship, and that comes in many different forms. So like we're entrepreneurs ourselves, we're investors ourselves. We understand both how entrepreneurs think and how corporates think. So it ends up being this like melting pot of a lot of the different things. You would never like sit down and like draw out and kind of design rainmaking the way it is, but it's just evolved in a very entrepreneurial way over the last 15 years. It's just grown into what it is today, just because opportunities have emerged on the back of what else we've done over the years. And you know, it's been very organic, basically.
That's what I was just about to say, that it's grown organically and you can't really plan for it. That you didn't have a set. Sometimes when I think about it, a lot of entrepreneurs, they will have a business plan and they will have specific targets they want to achieve, and you haven't necessarily kept to that. You have really pursued something and grown organically, which is quite interesting. And I'd say that like most of our things have some kind of a business plan, or at least some idea of what we want to do. And more often than not, that turns out not to happen at all. But like something else emerges and you just go with that. And like, so you change direction.
Organic is the way to describe it. And you have to kind of like have strong beliefs and try your hardest to make it succeed, but also be open to those new opportunities as they come through.
Yeah, you have to be able to be flexible and adapt to change, for sure.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Well, no, that's really, really interesting. And when we were talking initially about the process of entrepreneurs reaching out to you in relation to investment, you mentioned to me, especially on Teams, that a lot of companies will approach you or you will get in touch with them. And I want to break that down into two separate sections. First being, you get startups or entrepreneurs reaching out to you for investment opportunities, and they'll say, we want to get in contact with you. How do they best approach you? Like, how do they ensure they create a good first impression when they're reaching out to you, let's say?
So it really depends on like what stage they're at and how they, like what they want to do. So we obviously have Startup Bootcamp, which is, you know, a major global accelerator program. And there's a pretty sort of a set way of like kind of going through the application process and getting chosen. That's particularly suitable for like pre-seed stage startups, very early stage. In our venture studio, we actually look for entrepreneurs without an idea. So like sort of entrepreneurs who have previously exited a business or raised Series A, but like maybe that business didn't work. And we kind of approach them going like, look, we've incubated this idea with this corporate partner. It's like a great opportunity to build something that leverages that massive corporate scale, and we have all the funding ready to go. We just need the entrepreneur to kind of help us like execute it. And like, so that tends to be outbound, because like no entrepreneur would go like, oh, I'm going to go on LinkedIn and find myself a startup that's already prepaid and ready to go. So we tend to like headhunt those founders. And then within Rainmaking Impact, that tends to be sort of Series A investment opportunities. So again, that like those opportunities, either the founders proactively reach out to us and say, you know, around climate, if they're like looking to raise a Series A, or we come across them and kind of ping them and say, hey, you know, when you're looking for your next funding round, like talk to us. We're like a really easy partner to work with. So there isn't kind of like, oh, you know, reach out on LinkedIn and like magic will happen. It really depends on like which area of the things that we do is the most suitable thing. But like normally when people reach out to us, we always take the effort to kind of respond and communicate.
That's so good though, I
feel. Because like one of my pet hates, and bearing in mind that I was an entrepreneur for like over 10 years before I became even a moderate investor. And when like VC firms kind of go like, oh, we will only have people with warm introductions before we talk to them. It's like, I hate that sort of, you know, ivory tower approach to like, it's their job to interact with startups. And it's like, if you can't have a setup where you can, you know, be directly approached as opposed to these warm introductions, it's like, what makes you so special that like part of your job is to reach out to founders and listen to founders, like you can't even be directly contacted. It's like, so I really hate that. So I and my partners, we always take the time to respond to founders. Like oftentimes it's not a good fit, but like I don't mind if people reach out to me directly on LinkedIn or email, and I'll just say, it's like, look, we have very specific things that we're looking for at different stages of investment, and you just don't happen to fit it, or if you do, great, this is the process going forward. But like this idea of like I'm unapproachable is like ridiculous.
I really like the fact that you do that, because I feel like it restores confidence in those companies, because I guess from their perspective, they're thinking, okay, we need to seek investment. We need to find a way to get to the next stage in our development. And the fact that you respond to them is critical, because at least they think, okay, this person really cares about us, and they had the courtesy to at least get back to us, which is nice.
And as a founder, like genuinely, and I've done it so many times myself, it's like your rejection rate, and like often it's like ghosting, like you never just hear back at all, but like it's brutal. It's like 99% rejection rate, right? Like it's like so and I find that whole dynamic ridiculous, but like, you know, at the end of the day, I know how hard it is to be an entrepreneur, spending half your time fundraising and half your time trying to keep the wheels spinning so that the performance doesn't dip. So the least you can do as an investor is like help them with that. Like just don't be Sorry, I was going to swear.
You can on this podcast. It's fine.
But like, just don't be one of those people. It's just like, it's like your job to like either come to a quick no, let them know, and like thank them for their efforts, or like take it forward. But like, don't like just be silent. Don't sit on it. Don't like drag it out. Like, there's so many bad things that VCs do that I've experienced firsthand, and I've heard from other founders who they deal with it. So like, you just have the courtesy, like be human, have the virtuous mindset, do the right
I like
thing.
it.
You know,
I like that
it's yeah.
Good. No, I agree with that for sure. You've also mentioned to me previously that you are very proactive, and your team's very proactive in the sense that you will reach out to these companies yourself. And if you like an idea or you like a concept, you will build a business around it. I mean, that's what you've mentioned to me, and that, I suppose, story of your life in a way. You know, when we talk about it, where does that go-getter mentality really come from? Like, if you draw back on your earlier experiences or your earliest context in life, we're talking about way back when you were younger, where does that really come from?
I don't know. That's a good question. Like, if we go way back, I went to an international school in Holland, and like I basically started a yearbook. I think I was like 13 or 14 at the time, where we decided that we should have like a yearbook, and like we had to like raise sponsorship for it. Like, we had to like go and build a team that would create the content for the book, got it printed, sold it afterwards. Most entrepreneurs, if they dig down deep enough, they have like a lemonade stand or something, right? Like I sold yearbooks, I guess that counts. But like, you have this like willingness and excitement about like building stuff and like doing stuff. But like, I think a lot of people do. I don't think it's that different than like working hard for a sports team or something like that. Like a lot of people have that energy. Mine kind of went dormant for a while because like I then went sort of the corporate career. I do think that like I'm a much better entrepreneur than I was a sort of a career track financier or whatever you call it, because like I have that, I don't know if I have the creativity, but like I get excited about thinking of new business opportunities, and not just like, and I think a lot of people do, I actually try and make them happen as well. So like getting it done, like I really get excited. Like nothing makes me happier than the initial phase of going from like a napkin idea that me and my partners might talk about, and then like trying to bring it to life. So it's like, how are we going to execute it? How much funding does it need? Like, where are we going to get the funding? Who are the people who should be involved? And like bringing that all together and getting it going. So like, you know, Peter Thiel said like going from 0 to 1, right? Like it's like, I love that bit. Going from 1 to 5 or 10 or 20, like it gets increasingly less exciting for me, which is like, if you look at like the startups that where I add the most value as an entrepreneur has always been in the sort of the first 3 years. And once it starts scaling, I think that there are better managers who can take it forward beyond like where I get excited about. But I think I'm quite good at that like very early phase stuff. And I think I've always had that. It's just that like when you come out of university, people kind of expect you to get a good job. And if you're capable of getting a good job, you kind of go like, I should do that good job. And then it's like, oh, I can get promoted within that good job. And it's like, oh, I can do this next thing. And it's just, before you know it, you're compartmentalized into this career track where you're good at it, but it's not like maybe the thing that you were like really good at. And as I said earlier, like I got very lucky that I got kind of like bumped out of that tunnel basically and got to do what I really enjoy doing.
Yeah, and I guess I feel like you've mentioned a couple of times that it's come naturally to you. And I guess this connects well with whether that mentality that you have to go after things, to convert an idea or a business from an idea into an actually fully fledged business opportunity, whether that's a case of nature or where it comes naturally to you, or is it nurture? And, you know, you've had experiences that have enhanced, you know, your life. So, you know, what do you think it is for you, I guess? So
I very distinctly remember my first day at Rainmaking. It was a sort of a metaphorical first day, but it was like sort of when I was about to launch my first startup, and I think it was probably like 6 weeks into it, 8 weeks into it, and we had looked at a bunch of different things, and I'm like, I'm so used to like leverage buyouts, M&A, strategy consultants. It's like, how do I open up a small business bank account with HSBC? I have no idea. Like, it's like, I have never done it. Like, it's that level of incompetence basically, because you don't know. But you just have to go like, okay, well, it can't be rocket science. It's like, I'm going to just like open up a bank account, figured it out. It's like, I need to, start marketing the product. It's like, oh shit, I need a website. On day one, you know nothing because you've never done it before. And you just have to kind of go like, okay, that's fine. Now, like having done it 6 or 7 times in terms of building my own startups from scratch, it's like, in my head, I have this checklist. I can launch something like immediately right now because I've done it so many times and I've helped other founders do it so many times. Me and my partners have done it like 50 odd times. So there is like sort of a muscle memory that comes into it, and like VCs love second time entrepreneurs mainly because they've learned a lot the first time around. So I think you kind of have the passion and the energy and the sort of like willingness to understand the risk. I don't like it when people say like entrepreneurs take like risk. I think it's actually managing risk what they do, but like I think some of that like sort of mentality and those skills come from who you are, but like learning how to run a company is a learned skill set. You start from like not knowing it at all basically, and like you go from there.
Yeah. But I guess, how do you acquire that knowledge in terms of, because sometimes in some situations, especially if someone wants to be an entrepreneur, they have an idea, but they don't know what to do next.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times people have acquired their knowledge through researching, like using Google and then taking it from there. But what initial steps can one take in order to convert an idea into an actual business opportunity?
I'd say like 10, 15 years ago, it was completely different. Like, first of all, it used to cost quite a lot of money to do a startup because computing power was expensive, and you'd still have like, before cloud, you'd have to have like your own service. And and like now it's just like, well, if you wanted to launch a startup, like it costs next to nothing to do it. And like, so like it's simplified a lot, but like your skill set and like the learning of like how to do certain things, there's also a lot more material available. Like honestly, you can go on Y Combinator and just do their sort of online lecture material, and like you'll learn a lot. Like it's, they've done an amazing job of just sharing all of that content out. I would even say like there's a reason why accelerators exist, and whether it's like accelerators that take established teams like Startup Bootcamp or Y Combinator or Techstars, or where you are an entrepreneur or wanting to be an entrepreneur, but you don't have an idea, and like you're starting at an earlier phase. You have Antler, you have Entrepreneur First, great programs for where you just want to, jump into that pool, but like that's all you know so far. Like there's enough support programs out there to like get you the knowledge and the learning, and like frankly, you learn by doing. Like everyone's first 3 months of being an entrepreneur is just 100 times worse than you planned in your head, because it's just so much harder, and like it's chaos, and like you have no resources, and like it's just hard work, but like that's fine. It's either you have a good idea that somehow bootstraps its way through, or maybe it's not as strong of an idea, you kill it, you move on, but you've already learned something just by doing that.
Yeah. So I guess you have to be proactive by signing up to these different programs and being mindful of that. But you also need to be aware that you have to act, and you have to actually do something in order to.
Yeah. So there's a lot of content out there, and a lot of like learning opportunities out there. And like at the end of the day, it just comes down to like sort of grit and resilience as well. Like you just have to take the mindset of going like, it's not going to go smoothly. It's just hard work. And like, that's one of the biggest qualities that I always think about founders is like it's grit. It's that sort of resilience and willingness to stick with things, but also then just being slightly malleable so that you can change your mind when it's required. Like bloody mindedness is not the same thing as grit. But I get that. And no, good advice for sure for anyone who's listening. Let's talk a little bit about the filtering process in relation to rainmaking. So how do you determine which companies to invest in versus the ones to not invest in? And I really want a step-by-step guide of how you go about figuring out which businesses to pursue and go ahead with. I guess, again, it kind of slightly depends on where we're talking about. So like if we look at like our venture studios where we either build our own startups or build startups with corporate partners, with the corporate partners is like, is there an unfair advantage that comes from the corporate partner? Like, you know, could we be a sort of a latecomer into a certain space and that just scale effect is going to like let us win? When we build our own startups, it's the classic like competitive dynamics. What differentiates us? Do we have a better mousetrap? You know, all of that sort of stuff, very basic stuff. Those are like when we launch our own startups. When we have startups applying for Startup Bootcamp and the various iterations of the accelerator programs, the applications basically include what's your idea, what's the traction, what demonstrates that there's a market need or, you know, acceptance for your product, and then very much about like the individuals involved. So again, at the pre-seed stage, it comes down so much about like the aptitude and the attitude of the founders, because you can have the best idea in the world, but like if you have the wrong founders, it's not going to work, and vice versa. Like most early stage ideas completely change by the time they execute. So, I mean, I've never had a startup that even remotely resembles the first business plan that I wrote. It's like, I mean, even like if I think of like Takumi, which, you know, I started in 2015. If I look at the first business plan, I was like, there's nothing in today's version of Takumi that looks like what I thought it would look like. Yeah. The macro environment grew from nothing to where it is now, roughly in line, but like the underlying dynamics were so different. Like every startup that entered that space ended up building a completely different startup than we all thought we would, you know, 8 years ago. So, and then when it comes to like later stage stuff, which is Rainmaking Impact, which is sort of Series A, actually that's where you start needing to like have the balance between the founder and the traction changes. Like in the pre-seed stage, it's all about the founders and like your belief in them. And at sort of Series A, it starts becoming more like, you know, is there a product market fit? And can that be scaled? And like, what are the proof points around it? And is the management team capable of scaling it that way or not? So the sort of the individual attributes and the traction of like the product itself, the balance starts shifting basically. So really, there's no like simple answer to it, but you know, it's like such a cliche, but it really does come down to the people basically who are involved. And you could be the right founder at the pre-seed stage or the seed stage, and you could very likely be the wrong founder or the wrong CEO at the Series B stage. Because going from taking a company from 0 to 10 people and getting the first customers and bringing it through that chaos is very different than running a 50-person team and with a view to scaling it to 150. They're like fundamentally different skill sets. Yeah. You know, and people always kind of go like, oh, so-and-so CEO who now is, you know, like the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world. It's like they did the whole thing. Those are rare, I think. You need to be a very talented individual to be good at all sort of 2 or 3 different phases of growth that a typical startup goes through as it scales. And sometimes the answer is like, you know, maybe you step back from the business and let someone else take it forward. Maybe you have to completely change the team around you to allow you to be the sort of the visionary, but like they do the day-to-day running. There's many ways of answering that, but like the things you look for in the founders at those different stages change quite a lot as the company matures.
I'm interested to learn, what is the difference in skill set between a founder that's at Series A versus a founder that's at Series B? Because you've mentioned a lot about the fact that it can change based on whether you're seeking Series A or Series B. So can you give me a good...
Talking about Series Seed and Series A now versus 10 years ago, it's like you need to go back a step, and basically like today's Series A is like 10 years ago Series B or even Series C. It's just mental. But anyway, that's a whole different discussion. But like fundamentally, if you kind of go like, well, Series A is when you reach roughly $1 million run rate revenue. So you have demonstrated that you can achieve more than the first proof points of product market fit. So you've started actually generating revenue. I would argue that you can reach 1 million of revenue through founder-led efforts, basically. It's like it's a small team still, heavy on product. Business dev is like still being led by the founder probably, or like, it's very sort of entrepreneurial growth. And you raise your money on the back of that. Then you use the money to try and get to a Series B, which basically means that you need to start generating like 10x revenue from your Series A in that sort of like next 2 years. So you need to start like hiring people who are good at scalable growth, because going from for example, like going from 1 million to 10 million of run rate revenue, you start needing to build organizational capability, middle management, it's a very different skill set. So if you go from a CEO who's basically like even like closing the big pitches themselves versus running an organization that has a chief revenue officer with a team, and there's, and like maybe a chief marketing officer with a team, and like getting them to function as a whole, you all of a sudden you become an organizational manager as opposed to an entrepreneurial manager, and it's a very different skill set. So like it's that sort of like recognizing what you need to build, and oftentimes what you've just built has to be broken up again to change it. And like also like maybe your head of marketing that you hired for getting you to a Series A is completely the wrong person to get you. They might get you to a Series B, but they're definitely not going to get you to a Series C. So you then have to kind of go like, well, what promises have I made those people? It's like, have I been open about the fact that I might need to hire on top of them or replace them? It's like, you need to be...
That is so worrying though, right?
But
and
like,
it's stressful.
It's if you think of the growth that a company goes through in the first 10 years of its life, it goes from 0 to, well, either failure at various points, or if it succeeds, it gets to several hundred people in size, and it goes from like an entrepreneurial team where they're all sitting around one table through to having departments who then have to interact with each other, with leadership. And like, that doesn't go from that to that. It goes through 1 or 2 steps to get there, basically. So the skill set is very different, and like you have to just kind of go like, and that involves the CEO as well. So some will never be good at going beyond that sort of where they have total control and like day-to-day interaction with everyone, and like that company won't scale. Others step back prematurely and kind of think that they're already a sort of a steady growth, mature company, and that falls apart as well. So like there's 1,000,001 ways in which startups die, and they're rarely the same, but like there's all those things that come into play. So like if you are a VC and you look at a company at a seed, Series A or Series B stage, your criteria for assessing them are quite different at each stage.
That is so interesting. And I didn't even think about that, because of course people that are not within the investment world are not going to necessarily know. So that's really, really great to hear about that. So I'm interested to know that once you've decided which companies you have decided you want to invest in, irrespective of whether it's Series A or Series B, I'm just going with the companies that you pursue and you think, okay, I'm going to invest in this entrepreneur. What additional support are you providing these entrepreneurs along the way? And it's interesting because when I think of you, I think of Dragon's Den, to be honest. I think of you sitting next to Peter Jones, I guess an entrepreneur reaching out to someone like yourself for investment. Then my presumption would be that they obtain mentorship, they get opportunities to get in touch with the network and that type of thing. So what else are you providing some of these entrepreneurs in addition to that?
So it's a really good question. As the companies mature, they raise money from like bigger and bigger VC funds, so like, and those guys will take on board seats and stuff like, so they over time they kind of outgrow us a little bit, so our input becomes fractionally smaller, because even if you retain the board seat, you go from being one of 4 people around or 5 people around the table to maybe one of 7 or 8 people around the table, also they're scaling, so they need you less, and so the earlier we go, I think the more helpful we can be, and like being entrepreneurs, that's probably where we add the most value. So like we at the sort of pre-seed, seed, Series A stage, the founders can reach out to us and kind of go like, look, I'm not getting along with my co-founder, we're thinking of splitting up. It's like, and it happens often. even if they've like known each other all their lives and they start a startup together, it's very stressful. Things can go wrong. They may have only just met, things can go wrong. There's again 1,000,001 ways in which founders break up, and like, or sometimes they just need a bit of marriage counseling, and like you're there to like facilitate that. Like, and it's like, if it does go to that, it's like, how do you exit a co-founder who was great originally, but like, what's the fair way of exiting them so that the company can continue to grow and they feel like they've retained value in that business by remaining a shareholder, or like all of those dynamics? Because like, none of those issues are new. Like, there are hundreds of startups or thousands of startups that have gone through the similar situations. We've been lucky or unlucky enough to see enough of them to like, when we hear this, we're like, let's have a conversation. I can give you 5 examples of how other people did it. Yeah. Hopefully it's helpful. So we like to just be able to, on a very human level, like talk to the founders and just help them where we can. Sometimes it's like connecting them with people or companies. Sometimes we're able to help them recruit team members. In the accelerator programs, the support is quite structured. So it's like, you know, effectively the purpose of a pre-seed stage accelerator is to get them ready for institutional investment, right? So, you know, that's where like sort of structured programs come in. And it's like making sure that your pitch is good, that your positioning is good, your business plan is good, your financial model is good. Everything like that is like sort of structured, where you know that by the end of the 3 months, you have the learning to be able to go and pitch to a VC and hopefully get money, basically. So yeah. No, that's really, really quite interesting.
I want to shift your mindset onto the topic of managing risk. I was really, really mindful of saying managing risk instead of taking risk, because you mentioned that to me earlier. But I guess as an investor, you have to have the foresight. You have to have the ability to take that leap of faith and to pursue a venture, right? Oftentimes you will invest your money into a venture where you haven't seen it to fruition. And so that can be quite emotionally taxing at any stage. So how do you stop yourself from worrying about your investments, especially when you're not really sure whether you've made the right decision? And of course, diversification is clearly an option, but what's your thoughts on that?
So I think that's like not just the option, it's the only way.
Okay.
So I've had several startups where we've had a lot of different types of angel investors, like, so ranging from like £10,000 through to $1 million and a bit, like as an individual investor, right? And I would say that it's inversely correlated how stressful they find the investment versus the amount of money that they invested. So the most chilled out angel investors are the ones who do it a lot, and therefore they know that like oftentimes startups go wrong, and like they understand the power law curve, and like they understand that like actually most of their investments will go to zero, but like the ones that don't are the ones that like make them all the money. Whereas, and like they make enough investments as well that like the portfolio effect really comes into play. Whereas some of the smaller ones end up making far too few bets, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And then like every one of those matters. And like if you made 5 investments, all 5 could go to zero, right? So like they get stressed about that. And like, so therefore they are the ones who will pepper you with things like, and like they mean it well, but like they will be the ones who are like proactively kind of go like, what's going on with the company and everything like that. Whereas like the bigger investors probably are like, you know, I'll just wait for the quarterly update and find out what's going on kind of a thing. So what I would say to any budding angel investor is like, go small and go and spread it across a lot of companies. Like if you have 50,000 to spend, that's not 2 investments of 25. It's not even 5 investments of 10. It's 10 investments of 5. Because then you sleep better at night, because everyone like the portfolio effect kicks in already. Like even that's not enough, but like at least it makes it. So when we kind of approach investing, I want to help every founder succeed, but I also know that I have a portfolio effect going on, so I sleep very well at night, because it doesn't like, it's like I believe in maths and portfolio construction. So like, but that doesn't like, you know, but I'm an entrepreneur, so like I really root for the founder. Like I really like, and I'll do anything I can to help them basically. But I also know that like sometimes the market just moves away from that startup, and like there's nothing you can do. Like so, but like if I only had made one bet, and even if I like love the founder, the market moves away from you. There's nothing you can do. So like you have to spread your risk, and that's the weird thing. Is like investors can spread your risk or their risk. The founders can't. They're like, that's their bet basically. So like I have like huge empathy with founders because like they're spending their whole lives on this one concept and idea and venture. There is like a binary outcome for them. Whereas with investors, you can at least get to a point where you have a portfolio risk spread. Founders don't have that. So like any investor who doesn't appreciate that and treats founders in any negative way, I have zero time for that, because like they're the heroes in this. Like investors are just investors. Like it's like you can make decisions and whatever, you can allocate capital, but like the founders are the ones who are actually spending, you know, several years of their lives even on a failed venture, and if it's successful, and like most ventures are only moderately successful, so they would have probably, if it's, unless it's like one of those 1 or 2 out of 10 kind of companies, they would have been better off just at a corporate job somewhere. So they're like sacrificing a lot of like stress and happiness and like whatever to do these things. And like I think they need to be, like investors need to remember that as well. It's like, especially when it doesn't go well and they're like, oh, that founder, like, you know, how couldn't they make this company a success? It's like, trust me, they tried. It just didn't work out. So and you have to respect that and just be mindful of that, because like no doubt that person is going through a lot of stress themselves anyway, so you have to just be there for them.
I guess you can really relate to them because you've been in their position, so I think that helps a lot of the time. But no, that's really interesting. I want to talk a little bit about your interest within the climate tech space, and this is specifically the businesses that you've created underneath that umbrella, so Rainmaking Impact and Terra by Startup Bootcamp. But I want to talk a little bit about Rainmaking Impact, and you've touched on it briefly in our conversation. From my understanding, it's an extension of Rainmaking itself, and the focus being on the climate tech space. Can you tell us a little bit more about Rainmaking Impact?
Yeah, so my partner Alex, he and his business partner Alon, they founded Rainmaking Impact about a year ago actually. And basically, so Alex is the original founder of Startup Bootcamp. So he was from the 6 partners, basically, he was the one who founded it. And we've done various things over the years. And like last year, we came back to going like, how can we actually help founders in climate space, particularly? Like, you know, Alex and I both kind of came back to this thing of going like, we have so much experience and like, we want to apply it to the climate space because it's like, the world needs it. Like, you know, like the world needs more investment in founders within climate space. We need to help them succeed because it's like a clock that's running down basically. And like, so we could do a lot of things with our time and lives and investment and everything. And it was just a very easy choice of going like, we want to help climate founders. So Alex basically designed Rainmaking Impact to be an angel syndicate, and with a view of like helping sort of Series A stage startups raise capital quicker. Because when you're a founder, you spend roughly half your time just fundraising. And sometimes you get a lead VC who's like, you know, willing to do 2/3 of the round, but like they're not willing to take the full round. So we realized that we can be very helpful in like effectively coming in as a sort of a friendly partner to those deals and kind of go like, look, if you have a lead VC, we'll come in and fill up the round with our angel syndicate network. And like, we're like very low maintenance as an investor and like, we're very founder friendly and we're there to help you. We don't come with any like terms. We just like follow what's already there, basically. Take those terms, help you fill up that round quicker so that you can go back to your day job and crack on and build the thing that you need to do. And by the way, our angel syndicate has a massive network of connections, which can then come into play as well. Angel investors get much better deal flow than they would otherwise, because like you, as an individual angel, you're not going to get on a Series A with a major VC. Like it just won't happen. Like, you know, angel investment tends to happen at an earlier stage, at a higher risk stage. and we're giving them opportunities to come in at a slightly later stage and co-invest alongside like major VCs, basically. So it's like great for the angels, it's great for the founders, and it's great for the VCs because like that round just gets wrapped up quicker, basically.
Yeah.
So obviously we still need to go through the sort of funnel management of like having many more opportunities every month of where we invest, and then like trying to pick the one that like we want to support that month, basically. And like we're obviously going to try and do a few more, like increase the frequency in investments, but like sadly you still have to say no to a bunch of founders, but like we can't do it all, but like at least we're trying to like help a bunch of sort of Series A stage founders do more.
Why are you specifically drawn to the climate tech space?
I'd feel really bad if I didn't do my best, like in 30 years time, like, you know, when I'm old and retired, and my children and grandchildren kind of go like, well, you know, you were doing innovation, you were doing startups, you were investing, you were building. It's like, why did you not do more? You know, I just wouldn't want that like on my conscience, basically. I feel like I have this opportunity and it'd be stupid. And it's not like it's a choice of like doing good or getting a good return. I think like, frankly, I think it's like, because the world needs to change. It's like, if you were really just opportunistic, it's also like an amazing investment opportunity, because like if you think of like the whole world needs to decarbonize, that's going to take a lot of investment. So if you're a startup that's able to capture some of that investment, you're going to be a successful company. So it's like, in many ways, it's like if you believe that we're either going to ignore the problem and just accept the fact that the world is going to just heat up, then clearly being a climate startup would be a bad idea. But if you believe that like whether we're fast or slow to it, we're going to get there eventually, in terms of like the investment will have to come, because, you know, whether it's like the climate activity that we see on the news every day now, or in 10 years time when it's a lot worse, at some point people are going to wake up to it and go like, we have to do something about it. So, but like entrepreneurs don't live in a vacuum. They need a support network. They need, you know, all of the sort of like foundational stuff around accelerators and like helping them become entrepreneurs, especially in climate, because I think a lot of them are like technical co-founders. There's kind of like three ways of like addressing carbon, right? Like, or greenhouse gases, like biology, chemistry, and engineering. Because like software alone doesn't eat carbon. Like you need a physical thing. So like, unlike some other areas of like technology or VC investment, like this one will have to come from like a lot of like lab stuff, a lot of university spin-outs, and therefore, on average, they may have less commercial knowledge than another type of founder. So like they need even more support. So I'm an optimist. So I believe that the innovation will come, and whether it's like moonshots on like nuclear fusion or like direct air capture, but like that's the sort of like the one end of the bar. But then there's all this like other innovation that has to happen to like decarbonize supply chains and, you know, transportation and logistics and, you know, industrial processes. And like each one of those little things requires a startup somewhere in the world to come up with that idea and then someone to help commercialize it with them. So like there's going to be thousands and thousands of opportunities, but like they need help. Like you can't just kind of sit back and go like, oh, the market will figure it out. So I don't know. I just feel like me and my partners have a lot of experience in both as entrepreneurs and as investors. And I think we can like do our bit to help the solution. And we're not doing it just altruistically. I think we can actually like make it into a good business case for our own investors as well, basically.
Yeah. And I also feel like you have a purpose that's bigger than yourself, and that's what a lot of entrepreneurs talk about. And I think, I mean, I'm quoting Sarah Blakely, but he's the founder of Spanx, but she talks about always having a purpose that's bigger than yourself. Do you find that that resonates quite well with you? I mean, you've talked about the climate tech space, which of course is a purpose that's bigger than you, but do you feel like you connect?
I think that's it. It's like I have 3 kids, and like I want to make sure that like they end up in a living in a world, and their children end up living in a world that isn't like materially worse than what we live in now. And it can easily be worse. So like it's like, so like the bigger purpose is like, you know, there's billions of people on this planet, and it's like there's a group of people, so technologists, innovators, investors, who can make a difference in that. and it's all early stage stuff. It's not like it's like one day someone's going to go like, boom, here's a massively scaled solution that's going to fix everything. It's not going to happen. It comes from like bubbling through innovation, like at small scale, then they get more investment and it scales up, and that's how we solve it. So you have to support the entrepreneurs at the very early stage to have that big impact later. So like, it could be that like in 10 years time, I'm like, every entrepreneur we supported completely failed. Fine, it can happen. But I also believe that more likely than not, some of them are going to have done amazing things.
Yeah.
And like, hopefully we help them along the way.
Yeah. And at least you've tried. You've done your bit, which then you can look back and think, okay,
at least
I did
tried,
what
right?
I did.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I want to talk about company culture because this is something that's really, really important to you. And I guess this is from the perspective of investors joining your investor syndicate. So that's what I mean by this. But there was an online clip on LinkedIn which stated that Rainmaking Impact have proactively built the membership syndicate to 1,600 members. They're the fastest growing climate tech investor syndicate in Europe. Now, how do you ensure that all 1,600 of those members all have a shared vision and purpose? Because even though you're co-investing together, they're all going to have different views and opinions because they're entrepreneurial, right?
Yeah.
So how do you ensure that all of them work collectively together?
So you're going to find this answer really disappointing, but like basically you don't. So every angel investor, so what we're effectively giving them is opportunities to back the entrepreneurs they like or the technology that they like. So there's no commitment of going like you have to invest once a year, twice a year, 10 times a year. You can make your decisions. What we want to do is like get to a point where they know that like we are delivering such high quality of deal flow that every time they want to invest, they want to do it through our syndicate. But like it's not exclusive or anything like that. What we want to do is achieve two things, like raise as much capital as possible for the founders that we really believe in, and then leverage the connections of those investors as much as possible. So like if you're a managing director at a big investment bank, you might have connections that are very helpful for that entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And obviously like there's probably some like sort of rules in investment banks where it's like what can you do and what can't you do in terms of making introductions. But like let's say you're a CEO of your own, middle-sized company and you can afford to make several $100,000 a year of angel investments. No one's stopping you from making connections, but like as an industrial CEO, you probably have great network of connections that the young entrepreneurial CEO would really value. So we will want to encourage those sorts of things. So like the benefit of like having an angel pool investing into you is like you have all of a sudden you might have 50 backers instead of one. And it's not the size of their check that matters. It's like they've invested and they want you to succeed. They want the investment to grow. They will make that introduction. So it's like it comes from the power of like the size of the group in terms of like that actively support the startup. I know that like in any investment, if you have 50 of them, it ranges from like family money to financiers to captains of industry to eco warriors, you name it. Like you get the full spread, and like they're all equally important because they can help in different ways as well. Yeah. So yeah. And they will disagree with each other, but that's completely fine.
That's normal, I guess. Yeah. No, that's really, really interesting. I want to move on to Terra by Startup Bootcamp. Again, we've talked about that. You've also mentioned earlier in the conversation what Startup Bootcamp is, so I won't let you go into that introduction. But can you talk me through the connection between Startup Bootcamp and Terra by Startup Bootcamp?
Yeah, great question. So Startup Bootcamp programs have historically always been like 10 startups selected out of 300 to 500 startups. Physical program, 3 months. You come to a location, London, Berlin, Melbourne, you name it, as a founder team, and you go through the accelerator for 3 months and then you graduate. And it's a really full-on, very immersive learning experience as well, like with loads of mentors, and it's like it's a full-on 3-month program. When we did like customer development with various alumni and founders, and we kind of asked them, it's like, what is the most important thing for you that you'd want to get from a founder support program? And basically it came down to like access to capital, and then the peer-to-peer network, and then the learning, which is effectively the reverse of the pyramid that you would probably, most accelerators would have been built on over the last 10 years, because it would have started with the learning and then funding, yes, but like most accelerators wouldn't have really, especially 10 years ago, wouldn't have really invested into the startups. You take equity, but you wouldn't necessarily invest. And then the peer-to-peer network would be great, but it's limited to like 10 startups. So we wanted to design Terra to be like a larger scale program where the peer-to-peer network of climate founders is like second to none. So the aspiration is to support 1,000 startups over the next 10 years. So like you have a really big alumni network who are just able to support each other in an amazing way. We also wanted to make sure that we have an ability to invest into the startups as well. And then we wanted to make the program digital instead of physical, so that it'd be easier for founders from around the world to participate. Because there's quite a lot of friction cost of like moving to London for 3 months and then back again, and like, you know, so founders always said, it's like, look, the physical activity is great, but like it's offset massively by having to move somewhere for 3 months versus not. So I guess the best way to describe Terra is like, it's like a light touch accelerator program that really focuses on getting the founders investment ready, so helping them raise money. And that involves like getting the brand positioning correct, getting the business plan done, the financial models done, getting the pitch practice in, understanding the capital stack that they will end up building over the next 10 years, just helping them understand that dynamic. And then obviously leveraging our VC network to make warm introductions, because if I know that you're a seed stage VC in Berlin and you only ever look at like battery storage, and I have a battery storage startup in my cohort, I'm going to call you and say, I'm going to send you an email with this contact. It's like, they're brilliant. Here's why. I can tell you about it. And that's a warm introduction you'll appreciate, because I made your job easier. The founder will love it, because they would have not necessarily gotten through the front door without that warm introduction. So we're trying to just make that sort of process like easier for the select startups that make it through our own selection criteria, where we really believe that the founders have something like, you know, that they can really scale and make a difference, and we really want to help them. And so by the time they finish that program, then obviously then we become like investors who are just willing to help anyway. But like during the program, like there's plenty of time for them to continue building the startup. So it's not like that many hours a week, but like the coaching that we do is very focused on getting them investment ready. Because remember, like a lot of climate founders, like that's alien to them. They don't really know any of that in detail.
Right.
So we're just getting them comfortable with the world they're about to step into, which is, you know, you're going to raise money from a VC fund and this is what it looks like.
Yeah. I feel like networking is everything, and I feel like it's such an important part of anyone's job. And actually, I was thinking about another guest that we were speaking to a couple of weeks ago, Hainan Zhang, who also went on an accelerator program, and she was saying that one of the reasons why she went on the program was the network, the access to network. So the fact that you were able to make that connection and create that warm introduction is sometimes everything for a founder when they're trying to get their foot through the door.
And it's like, I don't know, I guess it's like you could like sort of summarize it as like trust.
Yeah.
Like it's like, because cold contacts, there's no trust because you don't know each other. So like the network effect is like there's trust, there's a trusted relationship that lubricates that thing. And that gets them talking. And like after that, like that's where money meets, you know, opportunity basically. But without them, like you need to be there in the middle as a trusted
middleman.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Like, and it's like, part of me kind of goes like, the world shouldn't need that. Like, there should be just a better mechanism. But like, it's like, you know, at the end of the day, like everyone gets bombarded with a bunch of stuff, but like, that's where the value add comes from. But like, that's the difference between Terra and like the core Startup Bootcamp program. It's like, we just wanted to do this specific thing where we couldn't design something where we'd run a full accelerator for 1,000 startups. It's just too much. Like Startup Bootcamp historically so far has worked with 1,500 startups globally, but it's taken us 14 years to do it. And I want to do 1,000 in 10 years. So you could argue that it's the same number, but like we wanted to just focus it on the activity that they really valued and kind of like leave the other bits off the table, basically. Some of the other learning elements that like are very time consuming, but like they weren't really adding so much value, basically. So it's like a founder support program as opposed to an accelerator.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about those 1,000 climate tech startups in the next decade. You've mentioned to me that the acceptance rate in terms of getting onto one of your programs is 1% to 3%, right? So what do these startups need to do in order to get onto one of your programs? And I guess this is useful for them because this conversation's been great in terms of you sharing your advice, sharing your journey, but it'd be good for them to get that support in terms of what they need to do in order to get onto a program of yours.
I guess it's not really rocket science, but like they need to have technology that, you know, shows promise of like either an existing market or an imminent market. Our program isn't right for something that's like research phase at a university that's going to take another 10 years to get to be ready to be commercialized. Like we're looking for things where we can actually help bring stuff to market, to raise money, to commercialize it. And it's just where we add value, basically. So like, I think it needs to like, you need to show elements of like proof of traction, whether it's like pilot programs, MVP, first revenue, first customers, something where it's like, it's got traction of some sort. And sometimes it's like very faint, but it kind of still needs to be there. Second one is like most startups over the last, well, since VC has existed, would have had a slide in their deck, which is like total addressable market, and then the subcategories of that. In a way, in climate, you need something similar for like the total carbon abatement potential. So it's like your technical solution, like at scale, what is its potential to reduce carbon? We have, over 50 billion tons of carbon being emitted every year. We need to get that to zero. So it's like, does your solution address 100,000 of it, 1 million of it, 10 million of it, which would be huge? And like, so like, and like where we're pitching it is like, you should get to 1 million per year because 1,000 startups times 1 million is 1 billion. That's 2% of all global output. Like, so we're just like, we're not hunting those moonshots for like fusion reaction and stuff like that. And anything less than 1 million feels like you need so many startups to get to it. So it's like, we just want like, look, try and demonstrate that you have an addressable market in terms of carbon abatement potential of 1 million tons a year. And then if everyone succeeds, we get to the gigaton, which is our own internal big hairy goal, basically. So, and then on top of that, so that's the sort of the climate impact side. You then need to obviously be able to have a viable business. Because you can have carbon abatement potential that's huge, but it might not have any commercial application. So like that ends up being a not-for-profit or governmental initiative that needs to be done because it's good for the world, but it can't be VC backed. So the commercial case has to be there as well. It needs to be VC backable, basically. So like, and then the most obvious thing is the team. So it's basically like team, commercial potential, signs of traction, and then the size of the carbon abatement potential. You tick those 4 boxes and you're far
just
along
those 4 boxes.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's not an easy world, but like that's what it takes, right?
Yeah. So let's say you've got an entrepreneur that's really passionate, that really wants to get on one of your programs, and then say is unsuccessful and doesn't get onto one of your programs. What advice would you give to them? I mean, if you had any thoughts on what they should do next.
So there is, depending on who you believe and trust, I don't think anyone knows the number. I was going to say there's 3,000 accelerators in the world. I heard some VC say the other day that there's 8,000. The point is, there's a lot.
Yeah.
Startup Bootcamp is the 7th largest in the world, and it's the largest outside of the US. It's like sort of a top 10 MBA. It doesn't mean that the 10 to 50 are bad. Like, they're great. Like, so the point is, like, just because Y Combinator or Techstars or Startup Bootcamp says no, just ignore that. You're going to be rejected by investors as well. Like, just, and like, you never know who's going to say yes. So like, grit, determination, keep going. Just like, if you want to do an accelerator program, there's going to be an accelerator program out there for you. Yeah. And oftentimes, like, it's a bit like with VC investment, like a top tier VC will say no to you. Someone will say yes, and you end up becoming like the best thing ever. Like, it's like, accelerators don't know what they're talking about always. VCs don't always know what they're talking about. Like, it's like, people make wrong decisions. So like, just chalk it down to people having made a wrong decision about you and just keep going.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Take it with a pinch of salt.
That's what I would do as a founder. It's like, you keep going till you get the money.
Yeah.
You know, like, you just keep raising. Yeah.
This has been such an amazing conversation. I have one more question and then I'm going to let you go. What's the impact been from rolling out Terra so far? So
it's so early, so like very little, because like we're literally in the process of starting the first cohort, basically. I think it will, ask me again in 10 years, it will be a gigaton of, 2% of world's emissions sorted, tick. That would be amazing. Yeah. I mean, Startup Bootcamp has done a lot over the last 13 years. Like, we've helped 1,500 startups, and we genuinely think that we can do the same with climate. So, yeah. Brilliant. Thanks so much for coming on. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.